Less than a decade after the beginning of perestroika, Russians celebrated the year of the Romanovs. This marked 380 years since the establishment of one of the world's most powerful dynasties. In Russia, until recently a bastion of atheism and the dictatorship of the proletariat, the flowering of monarchism is particularly striking.
Поэтому это наиболее законная, Богом утвержденная власть. То есть,
когда народ вернется к Богу, в России восстановится самодержавная монархия.
Все-таки сама идея восстановления монархии сейчас выглядит, на мой взгляд, довольно нереальной. Ну, кого возглашать царем?
Прежде чем быть монархией, надо у себя в Отечестве взять власть в свои руки.
Бывший узник психушки. Сообщаю вам то, что в 1995 году по плану космических или Всевышних сил в России произойдет новая революция.
эту монархию поле увидеть обязательно.
With the collapse of the communist regime in its Soviet empire, many Soviet citizens seemed to lose their moral and political bearings. In their search for new goals and new dreams, Russians are returning to their historic past. Many have concluded that Russia's greatness was always linked with its monarchy, and particularly with the dynasty that ruled Russia for over 300 years, that of the Romanovs. Though the fate of the Romanovs was horrifying, it was part of the larger tragedy that fell upon the people they had ruled since 1613. At a time when hardly anyone in the Soviet Union took any interest in the past of the Russian nobility, some Russians in exile did preserve family histories. The fall of the Soviet regime encouraged many of them to try to re-establish their links with the land of their aristocratic ancestors. But for 96-year-old Yakov Romanov, who had lived in Australia for more than 30 years, the changes came too late. It was not long before his death when he finally told his son Victor the secret he had long kept hidden.
Father went to Russia 3 times, and on the 4th time he said to me, "All your life I tried to hide from you very important thing, and that thing is that we belong to House of Romanov. We are from the same boyar family the first Russian Tsar came, and I would like you to be proud of what you are and to know who you are." And meaning of my life changed from that moment.
When Victor's wife Elaine married into the family, she saw no unusual significance in his name, Romanov.
It was only in the last 3 years that he started to inform us of his past. He didn't tell us very much because you have to understand he was a very sensitive and a very emotional man, and we didn't want to press him to upset him. There were certain aspects which to him were very sad, and he always promised that he would tell us when he returned with us to Russia. Not only did we lose such a wonderful man, but we've lost a lot of history. Now my husband and I are trying to remember every little bit of information, Father's memories, everything, and try and piece things together.
The demise of the Soviet regime created renewed interest in the history of Russia's old noble families. Establishing the facts, though, was not so easy. It's not just that the Soviet archives were largely inaccessible for more than 7 decades. Many were also very badly maintained. Besides, Russia's own history had been rewritten so often that it was extremely hard to be sure of the truth about the fate of its great noble lineages. At a time of chaotic reconstruction, the rediscovery of Russia's past has become a flourishing business. It's not just the exiles who are returning today. Everyone seems seduced by the romance of Russia's past. This, for example, is Tsarskoye Selo, one of the many imperial summer houses where lavish parties were held for the royal court. Amidst the misery of daily life today and its many insecurities, some are trying to recreate the elegant and extravagant life of the old Russian nobility. By the 16th century, Russia was already one of the mightiest countries in the world. However, at the end of the century, the previous dynasty, which had led the country to greatness, became extinct. The new dynasty which came to power was selected from the house of the Boyar family of the Romanovs. This was not by chance. The Romanovs were one of the richest and most influential families in Russia. In the next 300 years, Russia expanded enormously, making the Romanov dynasty one of the wealthiest and most powerful in the world. Early in the 18th century, the capital of the empire was transferred from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Russia's rulers began to build new palaces for the royal family, hiring the best European architects and spending lavishly on their pet projects. In this way, there appeared a number of unique architectural complexes around the northern capital, such as Tsarskoye Selo, Pavlovsk, Peterhof, Gatchina. But the pride of the royal family was the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. Today it is known mainly as the Hermitage, after the museum which houses one of the world's great art collections. It is less well known as the private dwelling of the royal family. In part, this is because in the 1920s and 1930s, the Soviet government tried to eliminate all traces of the royal family. The reasons for this are explained by the deputy director of the Hermitage, Dr. Matveyev.
Our Soviet regime tried to clean memory about Romanov dynasty, about imperators who lived in this palace. If you remember about your past, you think about your future. If you forgot your past, it's impossible to build your future.
But the Romanovs themselves were also guilty of suppressing the past. To preserve the supremacy of the senior branch of the family, the Romanovs deliberately hid information about junior lines. It is known, for example, that Tsar Alexei, who ruled in the 17th century, had 13 children. 4 of them became Tsars. These were Theodore, Ivan, Sophia, and Peter, better known as Peter the Great. But what happened to the rest is unknown, although their names and the dates of their deaths were scrupulously recorded. Did they have any children? Probably, but history is silent about this. Despite their almost unlimited power, almost every second Russian Tsar died a violent death. Peter III was suffocated, possibly on orders from his wife, who later became the Empress Catherine the Great. Her son, Paul I, was killed by conspirators in his own bedroom, with the silent approval of his son and heir, who ascended the throne as Alexander I. Alexander's death was so mysterious that many believed someone else lay in his grave. Rumours about the suicide of Tsar Nicholas I are not entirely incredible. After all, he left Russia on the verge of a colossal military and political catastrophe in the Crimea. The fate of another Tsar, Alexander II, was also tragic. He was fatally wounded by a terrorist bomb just as he was about to adopt the first constitution in Russia's history. What did the future Tsar Nicholas II think when, as a 13-year-old boy, he stood before the bloodied body of his dying grandfather? This vision of his grandfather's appalling death would haunt him all his life. And when his time came to ascend the Russian throne, after the sudden death of his father, he accepted it without joy or exultation, but with fear and sadness. There are many possible explanations for the misfortunes that overtook Russia in the 20th century, but probably no one contributed so much to the decline of the monarchy as the last Tsar himself. The trouble was that Nicholas II never truly came to terms with the needs of the modern world. Alexander II had introduced a series of reforms that began to turn Russia into a great modern power. It was up to his grandson, Nicholas II, to continue this process, as his most energetic advisors, Witte and Stolypin, began to insist. But Nicholas wanted to preserve the monarchy in its traditional autocratic form, and he made some reluctant concessions only after defeat in the Russo-Japanese War and the chaos of the 1905 revolution. Yet Nicholas could not or did not want to see the approaching catastrophe. As if in a dream, he moved ever closer to the abyss. Meanwhile, it seemed that no other royal family in the world had the power of the Romanovs. When in 1898 a census was held of the entire Russian Empire, the Tsar wrote in the column for occupation, "Owner of the land of Russia." So what was the last Russian autocrat like? A contemporary who knew him well remarked, "If it was said that Caesar did not have any flaws but only vices, then we can say that Nicholas has no vices but only flaws." Nicholas was an exemplary family man. He worshipped his wife and children, and was so courteous and polite that a retainer once said, "For God's sake, get angry at last, Your Majesty." It was a sad irony that the most powerful sovereign in the world was at the same time extremely weak-willed. Some people misinterpreted his courtesy and gentleness as cunning.